All right, welcome back to the Local Church Podcast. We're glad you're joining us today on our topic for longevity in ministry, how to continue in ministry in a healthy way, how to see success last, and for us to glorify God in that. I'm your host, Todd, and I'm here joined by Pastor Robert Altman, and we can't wait to share some experiences that we have and just some tips for you and how to continue in ministry. So, Pastor, start us off. Let's just start with a nice introduction and see how it goes.
Well, first off, I want to say this, Todd, is there are many reasons not to stay in ministry, and there's one reason to stay in ministry. And the reason to stay in ministry is that you love God and that you love people.
Yep.
But first, your love for God. So if you want longevity in ministry, remember the audience of one. Remember that you worship God and that your ministry is about bringing people to worship God, to know the God that you worship, to love the God that you worship. Be clear on that. Keep that out front. There's many reasons to quit. There's one reason to stay in, and the one reason to stay in outweighs the million reasons to quit by an infinite amount. Right? So there's going to come up things that's going to challenge us mentally, emotionally, whether it's in our personal lives, whether it's in our ministry lives, whether it's in our community life. That's going to challenge us on whether we want to continue in ministry or not. And remember, it's for the joy that was set before Jesus that he endured the cross and that he dealt with the shame. And he had a joy set before him. And our joy is his joy. And our joy is God. Mm-hmm. Right? Desiring God, loving God, knowing God. So I think that's the first key is remember that you're going to be challenged with ample amount of reasons to stop what you're doing. It can be frustrating. You can feel like a failure when you walk out the pulpit, feel like a failure as an administrator, as a leader, at a counseling session, when you counsel 20 marriages through 2 or 3 years and only one stays together. You're going to feel like a complete failure in a lot of ways. But you got to remember that Jesus is the priority, and do everything you can to keep a clear conscience before God that he is why you're doing this. The Bible's clear. Don't get in it for money's sake. Don't get in it because you're compelled to do it. Get in it because you love the sheep and you love the great shepherd. So, like I said, number one is there is a million reasons that people should quit ministry, and there's one reason to stay in. Stick to the one, and that one is Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and like you said, it outweighs all the rest. Let's go into some, personal experience that we have and why we're continuing to do what we do today and how we've got through them. I guess just my quick background, I was talking to Preacher right before we recorded this, going on almost 10 years that I've been helping lead in the worship ministry, and before that even the First Impressions ministry at church. And it's crazy to think about. Lots changed and a lot's transpired. For me, I can remember just 2 instances where I'm like, man, is this really for me? God really called me this. The first one was when I started leading, we had a choir, and Preacher knows this, and we had an awesome choir, but I was learning a lot, very young, and it just didn't work out. The choir didn't work out. The way I was trying to lead didn't work out. God taught me some things there. We had to change directions with the worship ministry. I think it's for the better. And it doesn't really have anything to do with the people. We had awesome people in the choir, and a lot of them are still involved in our praise team today and what we do, even at church. It was a lot of just maturing on my end, but I thought, man, because I saw success from, I was going to school, just starting in school in Charleston and seeing success there, looking at these other churches with awesome choirs, seeing success there, and I'm like, man, why can't it just be like that here for me, right? And you don't see all the stuff in the background that everybody else is having to go through to get to that. But you're thinking, man, why is it not happening for me?
Well, you made it because of 2 reasons. Number one, you understood your place, and number two, you had to figure out it was a transition.
Yes.
I mean, it was a transition. I knew when you were put in that place, it was transitioning. I understood that. Probably didn't communicate with that with you very well, but it was already in transition. You just took it through the transition, and at the same time, I mean, you were willing to make adjustments to make it work. So if you're going to survive ministry, you've got to understand that.
And you've got to survive those transitions.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be transitions in especially if you start a church. You've got the honeymoon phase. I mean, you've got the I got to get through it phase, the where's everybody gone phase,
Yeah, there's all those.
So transitions.
It is. Transitions, learning to deal with them, to go through them. For me, this is what's helped me, and what's helped me continue even as I sit at this table, is knowing that where we started and where we're at is good.
Yeah.
We talked
Yeah.
about metrics in the previous podcast and other podcasts. When God began to create, and Moses recorded this creation by revelation, and he began to write down. When God got done, he said, it's good.
It's good.
It's
Right.
good. You got to remember that when you're serving God, you're always heading to a good place. That don't always mean you're in a good place, but you're heading in that direction.
Right.
And so understanding transitions exist and not being down on yourself, and understanding your appointments. We don't talk about that a lot, but God has appointed us for seasons and times, and understanding that place you're in, whether it's a good place or whether it feels like a bad place, a low place, a high place, whatever the case may be. The fact of the matter is God has appointed that time and that season for you to trust him. If you're being super successful, that is the best time. It is the most important time to trust God.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I say most important. You always should trust God, but it's so easy to let success roll and become a part. And when I say success, where people are patting you on the back and looking at you and saying, how do we model things after what you did? That's when you better really cling to Jesus in a great way.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to lose grasp of that and forget that you really are the turtle on the fence post.
Yep.
That you're there by appointment. And when you're in a dark place, a hard place, you're there by appointment. Trust God there as well. He is transitioning you, he's growing you, and he's doing it through appointments, and he's doing it through the good times and the bad times.
Yeah, and through that transition, I know the ministry's in a healthier spot. The goal is clear, and doing that goal. So
Let's be clear, okay? With ministry, the way that the worship ministry is set up in the church now is there is room for musicians, and there's room
and congregational singing,
and for
participation.
congregational singing, participation. There's room for more.
Yeah,
And that's evident when you've got two fifth graders that can play guitar, play drums, an eighth grader on the piano, a young adult on the bass. It's clear when you have young people that's able to get in the mic and sing the songs and help lead in worship. It's clear when they fill the front row on Sunday mornings,
right.
and they're singing louder than everybody else. It's clear that we set ourselves up years ago for better discipleship.
Yeah.
Regardless if people loved or didn't like the choir or was in it or without it, the fact of the matter is we're in a good place.
Yeah.
And that's the place what we aim for.
And I think staying in ministry a long time, sometimes you have to look towards that long goal. They saw the promises afar off. They didn't receive them. They saw them. They didn't get it yet. And sometimes in ministry, you've got to look for that. You can't just, I guess, stay so nearsighted you can't move past it.
So we was at a football camp last week and met the strength and conditioning coach. He's a new strength and conditioning coach at a college, and got a chance to just chat with him real quick because we've seen some of the big boys out there doing their work, and they're massive and they're muscular, and me and this other guy was stopped and wanted to ask him a question. It's like, hey, so you're getting set up for the guys to come out, and what are you doing? He's like, no, that's in the past. I'm in the future. He even before they hit their spot, he's already got the next thing planned. He's looking forward to their next setup. So you do have to work in the present while keeping your face forward toward the future, and not getting bogged down in the now.
Yeah.
You can't get bogged down in the future either, but you can't get bogged down in the now. That's important.
Yeah, I'm going to go off a little bit here because what you said, he's looking towards the future. I was reading an article today on the theory of the mind and how it works. They had a study about different games that they're playing, and basically it's like the title of the article is, if you want to look at it, is The Theory of Mind, What Chess and Drug Dealers Can Teach You About Manipulation.
Okay.
Now, I ain't going to lie, it caught my attention when it had that. So
chess and drug dealers.
It did.
That catches my attention.
But they did a study with different participants almost playing these games, sort of similar to chess and stuff. And they realized they could differentiate the people that are looking one step ahead and the people that are looking 2, 3, and 4 steps ahead.
Okay.
there was a big difference in how the games were played out, not just from winners and losers, but the system of the game, if you will. And it says if people were thinking only one step ahead, the results would have looked completely different. Or if they're thinking from just reaction only. And I think in ministry, even though this is a secular article or whatever, I think in ministry, some of that's similar. If you're just reacting all the time to what's going on in ministry, it's going to be tough.
Oh, you're out. I'm going to tell you.
It's going to be
you
tough.
cannot react to everything that comes your way. And one very important thing, the longevity. Don't overreact.
Yeah.
Once you start overreacting, it unleashes things that you may haven't repented of. It unleashes maybe scars you have in your past. It unleashes some very bad things in you when you overreact. And once that dam breaks, the water comes flowing.
It's going,
and it's hard. You can't, when a dam breaks, you ain't gonna stick a brick back in the place to stop it. You know what I'm saying? You gotta run its course to the point you can restructure. So, for instance, if somebody comes up and lights your fuse with a complaint, or just with life, they light your fuse. Wait on that second or third reaction.
Yeah.
What you do not want to do is overreact. It only takes one time to overreact and lose the trust of those you're ministering to. Now, thank God there's probably a lot of churches that can forgive their pastors and their leaders and move forward on that. But when you start reacting to everything, sooner or later you're going to overreact, because that's what you're doing, is you are overly reacting to everything that happens.
And what we've gleaned from that for our ministry is how to look ahead and plan for stuff that hasn't happened yet. Hopefully some of the stuff doesn't happen yet, but if it does, we have a plan for it. We've got a nice property in the middle of town. We know people may want to use the property in the future, so we've already set up procedures of if somebody says, hey, we want to rent the church for whatever. We've had weddings, funerals, different things in there, and there's different, I guess, policies for church members, non-church members, all that stuff. But the point is, we've already started trying to look ahead and see if this happens, what should we do? That way, with a level head, we can think about it before we just, I guess, react to it. So,
and if I was going to add one more thing before we go to shut this end of it down, be who you are in Jesus. There is an aura. There's a feel around preachers and ministers. They feel like they have to put on what does this person think I am?
Yeah.
Be you.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, be the best version of you in Jesus. We're not asking for the raw, fleshly, uncut, uncensored, ungodly version of you. We're asking that preachers and ministers and leaders really seek Jesus to the point that when they present themselves, they're not cowardly, they're not proud, they're not boastful, but they're confident, and they aim at being correct, they aim at being loving, but they do aim at being firm. Be you, and it's okay to be you. If you have to pretend, sooner or later the act is up, and you're not going to make it as long as you want to, because you only can hold an act together so long.
Right.
Sooner or later, the real you is going to be there.
Yep.
So be the real you, and people will trust the real you. I don't know who said it, but it sounds great. Jesus loves you for who you are, not who you pretend to be. You want to build your flock to love you as a minister for who you are and not who you pretend to be. If you want them to be vulnerable and humble in repentance, you've got to show that same. You got to be that example of that. So learn to be you. That's something I'm more comfortable in my own skin now than I've ever been. I do the best I can to be who I am. I think people get who I am. And at least the people that's in our church, they get who I am once they get to know me. And that works out great. They know that I'm not going to be I'm not aiming to be the superstar pastor when it comes to the look or the talk or all the generalities that go with that. I'm looking to go minister completely, minister precisely, love them, and go home and be a father and be a husband and go live my Christian life out in front of my family.
Yeah. So be real, be honest. Let's talk about one last thing before we do close this down, and I guess more of your personal experience with the church, and this is going to be geared towards pastors more than it is, I guess, towards ministry leaders. But let's talk about the transition where the church went from, I guess, it being all Pastor Robert Altman to now we have a little bit of a leadership set up. You've got people around you that can help you, and talk about just the lasting effect. And we're having an elder deacon conference in just a few months, or just a few weeks, really, to go over some of the stuff with our leaders. How has that helped you set up for long success and the long goal in ministry?
First off, I didn't want to let go of nothing because I was the only one that did anything.
And that's tough.
And it's tough, especially when you let go of things and they crash and burn.
Right.
Events that you
Right.
would organize or lead, people saying they can't get volunteers and you had no problem getting volunteers. People saying that it wouldn't work and you've done it before and it worked perfect. There's no money there for it and you had no problem with raising the money to get it. When you hear all the no's, but you couldn't live in the no. I could not live in the no and have any ministry success. No was not an option.
No,
people saying no
be.
was kind of like, well, it's going to be a yes. Somebody's going to say yes. So I think, going from that to where I am now, and I told you and I told Cynthia this and Sam this and anybody, Adam, financial chair we have, there's things that I used to look at, I don't even know what in the world's going on. And it feels great. It really does. And here's why, because the stress I was carrying that would keep me from being a good pastor has now been, the burdens have been shared.
Yeah.
And things were just getting done at first, and now they're getting done better.
Yeah.
And there's a transition there, seriously. At first, your people that work with you, whether they're your elders or deacons or leaders or secretary or administrator or whoever it may be, at first, they're feeling you out, you're feeling them out, and things are just going to be getting done. Don't expect the transition to be like, oh, I handed it to this guy, and they're doing it 100 times better than I did. Well, if they're doing it 100 times better than you did, you wasn't doing it.
No.
And if you were doing it, you were messing it up bad. So understand that sometimes there's going to be maybe 6 months, a year, 18 months where things are just running. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to hit that clip where they get it and you get it. You trust them. They trust you, and you trust them big time, and they trust you big time. And there's a friendship, but there's an accountability there where, hey, you're handling all this financial stuff, get it right. Or, hey, you're handling this big event, get it right. I'm trusting in you to get it right. Only time that I'm hear about this big event is when you sit down and tell me what you've got set up. That's the kind of, that's what you got to have for longevity. You got to have that team there that gets it. And be patient when you hand something off. The people you hand it off to are not going to do it like you do it. They never will. No. You really don't want them to. You want them to do better. But at first, you have to let it flatline a little bit. Let them get their feet on the ground. Again, don't overreact to how you would have done it versus them. As long as they're putting their best foot forward, they're asking questions, sooner or later it's going to hit that peak where it's going to climb.
Right.
And they're going to get their hands on it, and they're going to do what they're good at.
And especially if you do see that development there. I mean, if the development from this event to that event is minute, maybe they're keeping up with their notes better. Maybe they're getting more help, or they're asking the right people, or whatever it is. And for small churches, and that's what we're kind of geared towards, small churches, you're not going to have everybody to begin with that you want. You may have one person that's really going to be your go-to right now, and that's fine. You and them, y'all share that. And, I mean, we're 14 and a half years in our church's life. And we're just getting really leaders that can do these things on their own,
Yeah, don't discount yourself if you don't, if you're 5, 10, 15 years in and you're like, man, I don't have nothing. Maybe, that happens.
Right.
There's a lot of pastors that pastor their church and they have a couple other men or women around them and they run with it. That's what they have. It's not, but if you're blessed and God has, decided to put people in front of you that can do things, don't hold them back.
Right.
Don't be lazy if God's appointed you to handle it all, you and 2 other people. But don't be ungrateful and don't nitpick everything your staff does and agitate them. Hold them accountable, look for excellence, but don't just be a pest. Yeah. Try to let them fail and succeed. You failed and succeeded. You failed and failed. Give them the room and grace to do that as well. And I think you can make it longer with a group around you that's supporting you in your failures and your successes.
For sure. Let's close by giving you our suggested, the foundation of this all is trust God and love God. Make your aim Him, make your worship geared towards Him. And a lot of this stuff falls into place once you do that. So we hope you join us next time, the Local Church Podcast. Go ahead, find us on Facebook, find us on YouTube. Now we're doing a video podcast, so you can look at it there. But send in comments, questions to the local church podcast at gmail.com. We'd love to have you, and we can't wait to see you next time.